Hey, everybody. Welcome to a really fun hour and a half we've got planned for you. We've got Jonah Lobe here. And if you are familiar at all with his work, you know exactly why you should be sticking around. And if you're not, then if you like concept art, if you like monsters, cool games, character design, or just watching really masterful creators work, you are in the right place. Uh,
Yeah, that
how's
is
it
my
going?
jam. Yeah, it's going great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm really excited to see what you've got for us today. Um, yeah, if you wanted to maybe give people a little introduction for those who might not know you.
Totally, absolutely. It would be my pleasure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonah Lobe. You probably are familiar with me from Adobe Live in the past. I've done it a bunch of times here, and I used to stream with Adobe as well. But a little bit about myself and my background. I started my work in this industry, in the games industry in particular, doing 3D art for video games. I worked on games like Oblivion, The Shivering Isles, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and Skyrim. And in the years since then, I've kind of worked on a couple other games here and there. I'm most notable recently for having illustrated a book called Marvel Anatomy, which is essentially a big compendium of superheroes and supervillains from the Marvel Universe, showing off their anatomy and how to do what they do. In fact, I have a copy of the book right here. Um, it was actually just sold. It was actually just sold out of the U.S. Actually, the world for a little while. It was sold out, but we just got a new shipment in store. So this is wrapped in cellophane. But yeah, so I did that illustrated book there. And then the big headline in my life, everybody, is that I just hosted a Kickstarter for the first time ever for a graphic novel called Quiet Level One, which is this. It's a comic book, a graphic novel about a little skeleton's quest to save the Tree of Worlds from destruction. So there's a lot of, if you're a fan of video games, if you're a fan of fantasy, if you're a fan of Dungeons and Dragons, any of these things, there's a lot of Easter eggs in there. There's a lot of things for you there. And it's a wonderful story, full of heart, full of adventure. It's scary, it's whimsical, it's funny. And the Kickstarter just concluded a couple of weeks ago. So you are seeing me much more relaxed than I have been for a while. And so today's stream is going to be really fun, low pressure for me, and something I'm really looking forward to getting into.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I will have to offer you a huge congratulations for that Kickstarter. Blew it out of the water.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I'm curious to see if we get to see a little bit of that art that you mentioned today.
Certainly, certainly. Yeah, I guess that probably a pretty decent place to start. Let me open up a couple of pictures for you guys, just so you can get a sense of what this world is about, and the directions I'm going with it. It's so I'll show off. I got a couple things, a couple different. I mean, listen, I got folders upon folders upon folders of work, but I'm just trying to think of here. I'll give you a couple snapshots of different
Sure.
moments. Um, yeah, it was basically, I kind of, it's funny. I actually came up with a lot of the ideas for Quiet, or at least some of the initial ideas for Quiet here on Adobe, whether I was doing streaming or what have you. So these things, when I was doing streaming for Adobe, one thing I really loved about the whole process there was being able to kind of decide what I wanted to learn that day. And then as I was learning it, I was kind of articulating it. So with something like Quiet, it takes place in the Tree of Worlds, which is this place here, which
Wow.
is similar to Yggdrasil from Norse mythology, except it's a little bit more gamified. So there's level one, level two, level three, level four, kind of like Super Mario or something.
Hmm.
Here is our protagonist. Their name is Quiet. They are a little skeleton who is very adorable. They are a non-speaking protagonist, so they don't speak. But there's a lot of acting and a lot of feeling that goes into this little character that you kind of see throughout the story, and you can get a sense of some of the panels here. There are speaking roles as well. So this is quite hiding from the villain. This is the primary antagonist. His name is Galahorn,
He's a
and
big bad.
He's a big bad. He's a big bad. So, what does a little 3-foot skeleton do against an 8-foot barbarian with a huge axe? We actually got this axe made in real life for the Kickstarter as a grand prize. It was,
That's awesome.
yeah, I was very, very excited about that, as was Galahorn himself, as you can see here from the smile. So as you can see, by and large, the comic is in black and white. I was kind of trying to go for this kind of nostalgic feel. There's a couple different reasons I went for it. One, I really like working in pen and ink. And while this is not pen and ink, it does employ almost all the same rules and guidelines.
Hmm.
And I really have kind of fell in love with black and white art in particular because there's a certain old school feel to it,
Really?
and also, as a way, there's many, as an artist, there's many ways to express yourself and to get across some, the art style of a thing and get across the feel of a thing. But part of the struggle for me throughout my career is how do I do this kind of thing in a easily reproducible way such that I can create a large amount of content? Because if you're
Hmm.
creating a graphic novel, you're doing a
A lot.
lot of work. Yeah. And so it started off as kind of a bit of a limiting factor, in fact, like a kind of a desire to create. I'm just going to get a couple more pictures for your viewing enjoyment.
Thank you.
Um, uh, it was a great way to create limits for myself and then be able to express myself within those limits. So this is actually a painting I did on the Adobe channel.
Nice.
A while ago. Quiet versus all these eels. This is a sample of a larger picture of Quiet and the Tree of
Cool to see it
Worlds.
in color.
It is cool to see in color. And so today we'll be working in color. And so that's one
Wonderful.
thing I'm really excited about. Yes, I think level one, it takes the book one, Quiet level one takes place in level one, which is an underground labyrinth. And so actually, level one, I've decided, is a black and white world. And
Nice.
then as we progress through the story, we will it will become more colored. But you can see here there's action, and there's some world building, oops, just keep drawing on these pictures. And so it's a world with a lot of promise, but I do relish the opportunity to do real color from time to time because I really, really, I have not always been really confident in my painting abilities when it came to color, especially because color is hard and color
Hmm.
is, you're adding on complexity. And yet, as I've gotten more used to it, I'm really falling in love with it. And so while I really, really am digging the black and white style of the graphic novel, I relish the opportunities like today where I get to hang out with you guys and you, Katja, and just like have fun and explore the possibilities that color
Awesome.
presents. Yeah.
Super excited to dig in. Yeah, people in the chat are loving Quiet, and some people are even remembering seeing those eels. So it's great to have some
Woo!
repeat
Thanks, guys.
viewers. Yeah, hey guys in the chat, please feel free to shoot questions and just hang out. Let me know what you want to know and we'll have a good time. But yeah, do you want to get started? I'm
Yeah.
super curious to see this. Is this is this a scan or is this a digitally done?
This is a scan. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So this is a scan. So a bunch of years ago, this is actually even before Quiet. So anybody in the audience who's familiar with Quiet in this journey, this is a precursor to Quiet, a little skeleton with a big head and no lower jaw. And I'd drawn this character a couple times before, and I kind of started leaning into this character more and more because people seem to like this adorable little character so much. And I love the idea of a skeleton, which are normally kind of creepy, being much cuter. And in this case, definitely being kind of this hapless character where surrounded by all these kind of very creepy, much more scary kind of shadows. This picture here is called Phantasmagoria, which basically calls back to when they used to, in the 1800s or whatever, use shadow puppetry and all that to create the effect of ghosts and goblins on the walls, etc. And so that was the word that was this was inspired from, and I created this image. And essentially, as you mentioned, the Kickstarter is doing really well, and or had done really well. It's over now, although you can secure a copy of the book still.
Good to know.
Um, and essentially, I asked my audience once we hit a certain stretch goal, what would you like to see? Here's a couple old pictures that involve quiet. Which one of these would you like to see updated and made into a color poster? Which
Nice.
is what some people will be getting. And so they went with this one, and I think it's a great call. And I already kind of know I want a sinister green kind of aura to this one. And I'm a big fan of lighting. And so, as you can tell here with pen and ink, I tried to do my best to convey a good sense of lighting. But today we'll be very loosely throwing together this same composition, but in a kind of a different style, maybe a slightly different angle or something like that. So yeah, so I guess I'm going to get started
Please
and see how
do.
it
That sounds
goes.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
while
awesome to know the context.
it's fun. It's really fun to know to have some understanding of the journey it that was required to kind of get there, get
Hmm.
here rather. Actually I just did a flood fill of a kind of a dark green, but I'm actually gonna get rid of that for just a second and just figure out like what my general composition is. And so I guess first I need to decide whether this is going to be a landscape or portrait. I think I don't know. What do you think? What would you prefer? Gotcha.
Are you asking me or are you asking the chat?
I'm asking you and everyone in the chat. I mean, because so here's what I'm thinking. In this original illustration, it's perfectly square.
Mhm.
Um, I did that mostly because I was kind of messing with square formats, and on Instagram, everything was square, etc. The benefit of one versus the other. Let's say this is the portrait mode and this is the landscape mode. What I'm thinking as I'm visualizing this is I'm picturing our subject and then a lot of lines that kind of coalesce. That, compositionally, essentially what I want to cultivate is a feeling of closing in and of ominous shadows closing in. And so this can go one of a couple different ways. We can have our main character in the image and having those kind of, shadows kind of moving in there, and essentially going either portrait or landscape will change the feel a little bit. And so, I guess I want to just I myself am a blank canvas and I can do either direction. So, is there one that appeals to you, Katya, or you, the audience?
Um,
Um,
I'll keep an eye on the chat, but yeah, I'm curious because in the one with a ton of headspace, it seems a little bit more like all of this force is descending and there's a little bit more of an unknowing because things coming from above, you might be a little bit more unsuspecting. Whereas coming from the side, it's a little bit more normal to have somebody creeping around the corner at you. But in
mhm.
either case, seeing a little bit more development of the darkest shadows, because in your square version, the shadows kind of cut off around the edge, but I think it would be so cool to see how it gets even darker and darker and darker. Um,
Mm.
so I'm not sure in terms of this particular force, do you feel like it's a little bit more supernatural and unsuspecting coming from above, or does it seem like something that sort of scuttles through a dungeon as a creator? What do you think?
My instincts, I could go either way, but I think what you're saying is essentially correct. I think starting with or maybe with this one might be the way to go. Just because, as you say, there's a feeling of crushing downward and movement downward, and whenever you can put your character, near the bottom, of a piece, you're invariably making them look smaller, and I think that's definitely the key. Um, Now but before I go either direction, I'm just kind of fleshing out these just a little bit more before I make it my decision, because I think one thing I've learned over the years is that if you want to get something really good, um, it pays to just mess around a little bit, you know.
Thumbnails and comp.
Yeah, exactly. Because you don't, oftentimes what the image that you have in your mind, there is often a better way to do it.
Mhm.
And or maybe it is the way to go, but you won't know for sure until you try a couple different things. And so I'm just kind of throwing him in with this light. Oopsie. Um, Throwing him in with this little light source here. And then what we can even do is we can even just do, as you say, let's do a black and white layer on top. And we'll grab this one here and this one here. And we'll say, and make that a multiply layer.
Nice.
And then I'll make a new layer and just clip it on here. And these are just us experimenting. And this is me. I already kind of know generally what how this kind of works out. So in terms of lighting, we'll have we'll have them kind of a certain lightness, a very, very light gray. Not altogether white because I want to save that for the actual light source itself. Um, and then we have essentially Quiet's own shadow, which is both serves to create drama, but also uh, serves as a way to have them jump forward. Especially when you have a subject that you want to draw attention to. You want areas of high contrast as much as possible. And so as I'm thinking about this, I'm trying to think of like, okay, how do I get that shadow behind them in such a way as to be like really effective? I can have these little lines connecting to their feet, like this. And in this case, it's a little off, because they're holding it to the left, then the shadow's kind of being broadcast to the right. So there's part of it. And then I imagine I'll have a little bit of lightness. This is where I start getting real messy. Um, a little bit of lightness around the side, where the light, whatever light source they're holding is actually reflecting on the surroundings. And again, creating this kind of vignette effect can be kind of helpful in creating enhanced attention. And then I'll create a generalized darker effect. And again, this is all clipping mask, so I'll kind of create that around the outside. And this is, a very unsophisticated way to get people's attention, which is just to vignette the heck out of it, make the sides darker. And then we'll have even darker effects of these scary, spooky shadows, which seem to be cast by the light source.
Awesome.
Yeah. And incidentally, at any point, any questions from anybody in the audience, just let me have it, you guys. Whatever you want. I can do multiple things at the same time.
It seems like I think most people are feeling the portrait, but it seems like it's kind of split between hamburger and hot dog, as people remember the vertical versus horizontal. Yeah,
Okay. All right.
definitely a different feeling between just the two layouts.
Definitely, right? Exactly. And I'm flexible either way, but so you can see, we had this basic layout, and we're just trying to, experiment, right? And like what makes sense, what looks good. I'm trying to think right now. I'm taking a moment to pause and look at what I've got and just feel like, okay, what, yeah, I just had, I know you guys sometimes interview Nathaniel Dotson, who runs tutvid.com, and he does a lot of stuff, work for Adobe. He helped me immensely during the Kickstarter. He put together the Kickstarter video and everything like that. And he's a brilliant dude. And he gave me a really cool, interesting piece of advice when it came to composition, which is like three things: creating a composition with three kind of different points of reference. Because if you have one thing, it is what it is. And then if you have two things, now you're creating some kind of relationship between them. And then when you're creating three things, now you're creating three subjects rather. Even the third one is small, you're creating more of a movement and a intertwined story. So
Hmm.
at the moment, I'm just wondering to myself, okay, people seem to be liking the portrait mode, and I think I'm into it as well. Um, is there a third element that won't complicate things? I don't want to complicate the thesis statement that we're working with, but I do also at the same time want to create. I'm a big fan of kind of environmental storytelling and just kind of figuring out how to create a little bit more action, or not action, but just or implied story.
Nice.
So I'm just trying to think like is quiet like against like a particular background, um or is there like an Indiana Jones style pedestal, that
Hmm.
by creating the pedestal, now we're creating the story, right? Quiet just remove this from the pedestal. And everything we know about fantasy tells us, uh-oh, he just awakened something. Um, they just awakened something, sorry. Um, so I think that's a pretty cool, I think there's some good possibilities there. So I'm just kind
Nice.
of temping this in, just seeing like, does that do something for me? I think it does. I think if I were to add that element, I'd want to figure out how to focus it a little bit more as a storytelling element. Like what I mean by that is like basically putting a little bit more foreground, a little bit bigger. Yeah. Anyone in the chat have any ideas about what could be a cool third element? Yeah. So like again, there's the background we can work with, and maybe that's a big jagged piece of rock, or maybe there's um, I don't know, columns in the background or something, or like maybe there's a doorway. Um, maybe we're standing in the dark and there's a doorway, and maybe the doorway there's a more light back there.
Hmm.
Just I don't know that I like that idea. I'm just experimenting with that concept. Um,
People are debating whether or not Quiet has a little sword typically.
mm,
Do they?
Typically not. I do have. You probably can't see this in the tiny little window, but I do have
Oh,
this little figurine that shows Quiet. There we go. Thank you very much. That does show Quiet. This was something for the Kickstarter. Um, that does show Quiet with
very cute.
a sword. Yep. But I'm open. I'm open to if let's see. Do people want a sword?
Let us know, you guys.
Let us
Oh,
know. Now quickly as we're working through this, I'm going to go ahead and flip this.
hmm.
Because then we tend to see things a little bit differently when that happens. And also, so I think I'm going to go with this one on the right as a possible layout. So that's good. I'm going to go ahead and group these layers, and then I'm going to do another pass. And this pass I'm going to do another like little temp image. And this is something I really like about doing these paintings is you can move so quickly. And just iterate very quickly. And I like to work really roughly. I mean, if you look at this work I've done, I mean, it's so sloppy and rough, right? But it allows you to get your ideas down really quickly. So
Gestural.
yeah. Um, so if and then in this case, I'm thinking, okay, well, what if Quiet is a little closer to the camera? And so maybe they are down here, and we're a little bit below them, and they're looking down. Maybe their eyes are a little bit wider. And they're looking down at this lamp in their hands. And so we're actually like it's a little bit spookier of an angle. We'll get to capitalize on the lighting on Quiet's face a little bit more. We bring the lantern a little bit more into view, into the foreground, that is, and maybe the top of the nearby thing is here. Like this is the where they got it from. Probably go over a little bit. And then by doing that, we kind of create now a little bit more intimacy where we're even more focused. We're less focused on what's all around and more focused on Quiet's reaction and expression. And then we can get the things behind them. So I'm just experimenting with that. I'm not sure. I probably did not like I don't know if I stuck the landing with regards to placement and everything like that. And in fact, there's a quick way for me to figure out if I did that, which is flip horizontal.
Super cool to see this beginning sort of real-time thought process as you figure out the composition and the tone you want to tell with this little story snapshot. I think so many artists will just jump straight in, and there's not anything wrong with that, but in terms of setting yourself up for what is going to be a long process of digital painting, it's very cool to see this sort of beginning stage get a little bit of extra love in the planning and thumbnailing and composition consideration.
Yeah, I've just had so many paintings and compositions that, you get like 60, 70% of the way through and you're really, really digging it, but there's just something that's not clicking. And then you realize like, oh, it's a fundamental compositional,
Mm-hmm.
and like
But you're too far in.
you're too far in, right? Like it's too late to make that change. And so I want to love a thing from start to finish. And, you usually don't because art is imperfect and, all that stuff. And so I would love to make this something that it just works from the get-go. But you're right. You just need to iterate and experiment. And because just like a film, the angle you pick and everything, it just changes your perception of what's going down. And so in a case like this, whereas here I'm focusing on what's going on in the environment,
Mm-hmm.
um, with this one, you would still see those looming shadows, but the emphasis is a bit more on our protagonist and their reactions. And I think typically, I'm shrinking him down a little bit and moving him a little bit over to one side just to kind of make them feel a little bit smaller. Um, I think my usual go-to when it comes to decision making, and everyone's different, of course, but um, is emotional connection.
Hmm.
That's really critical for me. I think that's been a driving ethos of mine for a long time now when it comes to art. Is there's so many artists in the world and so many of them do just amazing stuff. Sorry, I'm just want to make sure those are a little bit more um, actually vertical. Um, and there's so many ways in which I can't hope to compete with so many incredible artists, right? There's like, we're just surrounded by unbelievable amounts of talent. But I've always felt like, all right, if there's one, if my art is not as good or my rendering is not as good or all these things, it won't matter if the audience feels an emotional connection to what I've created, because then all the little nuances just don't matter as much because you've forged an emotional connection with your audience and they're invested and that's it. And I think, the Quiet Kickstarter did well for a number of reasons. I worked really, really hard. I had a great team. I had a lot of people volunteering to help me out in certain cool ways. But I think a lot of it comes down to people feel emotionally invested in this character, you know?
Oh.
And so I think it's always a good call to feel like when you're creating a piece of art, why do people care about this art? Is it just pretty or does it make them feel a certain way? And so in a circumstance like this, I'm kind of thinking like, what do people feel? When they look at this, what do they feel? And what do I want them to feel? And in this case, as is often the case, when you have a silent little skeleton as your protagonist who's super cute and who's somehow very chubby despite being a skeleton, um, I want you to feel worried for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. I mean, it the success of your Kickstarter definitely is a testament to all of that. Um, Clever in the chat on the topic of composition said make it work from the get-go, which is a good tagline
From the
to
get-go?
the get-go or the gecko. Um, I'm curious how you settled on this design for a protagonist because it anyone can see it is extremely endearing as a little character, but there's no pupils, there's no moving facial expressions the way you typically get with a meat character
Yeah.
um, or a squishy character. Uh,
Hmm.
and also the self-imposed limitation of not being able to speak. You really limit yourself in terms of the tools you have available to you to make this such an endearing character, and yet it is. So I'm curious how you landed on Quiet's design, and especially as a under the full impact of this is going to be my protagonist for such a big project.
Absolutely. Great question. I'll show you just a quick behind the scenes of a couple of things I did
Ooh.
to kind of figure it out. Because there was multiple iterations and I wasn't sure about a lot of things. So the very first time I painted Quiet, and again, their name was not Quiet back then. It was just something I did on the Adobe channel. Where am I at here? Digital art.
The first Quiet
Um,
was on the Adobe channel?
I believe so. I believe so.
Wow.
I think, or it could have just been on Twitch. I can't quite remember, but I think I was
We'll say
doing,
it was Adobe.
yeah, let's say it was Adobe. Why not? It was this character here. And there was nothing fancy about it. I just came off the conceit of like, wouldn't it be a cute, funny thing is if you had this little skeleton in a dungeon, but who just looked worried and looks
Hmm.
at what if skeletons were afraid of the dark? That was kind of the kind of conceit and conceit. And so I had this little character who's got a big head and this round little body and these little limbs, and just looked worried. Like you just like you kind of feel bad for this little guy. But even then, there was a lot more emphasis on them making it really skull-like and all these things, and then I kind of iterated. Again, you have this image over here. Um, again, tiny little skeleton, big head, but it wasn't yet quiet. And I think what made the real difference is I kind of started thinking about quiet much more fully when I was a father.
Hmm.
And I had this little 1-year old with her big head and her fat little belly, waddling around my apartment, learning how to walk. And it started really pushing me in the final direction. There's some things I did. For instance, I got rid of the teeth because teeth are creepy.
They are.
Um, um, and if you ever see like an actual child's skull, like online or whatever, like they have all their little baby teeth and then all the adult teeth
Oh
above them. They're
yeah.
nightmarish. I know a lot of you guys have seen pictures of this before. They're so scary.
Google at
Um,
your own risk.
yeah, exactly. Um, and so I went with fatter limbs, kind of small hands but big forearms, fat little forelegs, and then kind of this round tummy. That's usually thrust forward a little bit, kind of
Hmm.
again like a little baby, kind of. And the eyes are big. They're not huge because I don't want to go with the anime big, huge eyes.
Hmm.
Definitely big though. And as you can see, they can do things like smile, you know, um, they can be kind of neutral but still cute. And then I think what really happened was I created this one drawing here. This was, so I did this, as I said, I did these drawings first. Um, the one I just showed you, this one here. Sorry, that one here. Still an indication of teeth, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
kind of a rigid, kind of little too skull-like, and then there's little spinal cord and all these different things and little feet. It was cute, but it wasn't really cute. And I this was my first iteration, and I kind of I there's a couple different reasons I abandoned this look. When I went with this though,
Hmm.
this is the first time where I was like, oh, I have a sense of this character now. The little butterflies and the fat belly and the balancing on a log, very Calvin and Hobbes whimsical,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Especially with
that changed things. And then eventually just kind of developed this more rounded, softer style and aesthetic, and have been able to find ways to get some really good mileage out of, as you say, just these eyes. So if I just pull up a couple more, I'll get back to the painting in hand, but you make a really great question. I know a lot of the people in the audience are really into character design, and
Mhm.
I love character design. And so, so trying to come up with a way to convey emotion through this character's expressions, etc., has been really fun and quite a journey. So there are, even though, again, as you say, no pupils, just kind of eye sockets,
Mhm.
there's a lot of ways in which subtlety can really get across a feeling of real emotion. So here, Quiet is panicked. They're scaring away this black ooze called the greed
Hmm.
with this lamp, and then still a little panicked, and then just kind of collapsing in a heap, kind of like feeling better. And then this was worried. This is worried and resolved, and then they go off on their plan. And then you have a bit more neutral expression here. Um, you have a bit more panic, doom and gloom, kind of like, oh no, I've been spotted. And then, oh no, wait, I haven't been spotted. What is this character looking for? And then you see him looking over here, and the villain has discovered this ooze, and uh-oh, the black stuff is behind me. So there's a lot of room there for
Yeah.
um and even here you have kind of this like surprise, whoo, and then kind of like what's going on? Like what, and then whatever. So you kind of get this evolution of the ability to convey expression. And so, and there's other ways in which, you can play with body language a lot of the time. In this instance here, body language is certainly, you know, they're wowed, they're kind of trepidatious, but fascinated. Um, so I'm really excited about the possibilities of conveying these levels of emotion, like within these frames. I should say there is a character named the Narrator Worm, who you caught sight of just a bit ago. I'll show you one more time right here. Um, the Narrator Worm is their friend, and the Narrator Worm can speak.
Nice.
Yeah, and so the Narrator Worm, and in fact, the Narrator Worm, that's all the Narrator Worm can basically do. The Narrator Worm is Quiet's sidekick
Hmm.
and best friend. And it's basically a species of caterpillar that can only narrate from the perspective of whoever it's with. And in this case,
Oh.
who it's with is Quiet. So while the narrator worm is its own character with its own thoughts and feelings, and will frequently editorialize the narration, to maybe cheer Quiet up or to cue Quiet into some exposition that Quiet didn't know, or sometimes the narrator worm can intuit what Quiet is thinking. Sometimes they can't. So there's that helped embolden me to create a character that didn't speak, because I was like, if the main character doesn't speak, there's an element of mystery. But then if you have this character that travels with them, that's kind of comedic relief and exposition and all these things, now you have the opportunity to do a lot of the work that maybe a speaking character can do without having to have the character actually speak.
Nice. Yeah, people in the chat just love the design.
Oh,
Bruce
well,
asked if you maybe have ever used your daughter as reference for some of the specific poses.
You know what? I haven't. I haven't. And unfortunately now my daughter's 5, so
Well, there you go.
she's her body's getting all stretched out, or like shins getting gangly and things like that. I mean, realistically, she's probably a better model now than she is because I was looking at like basically a not even a toddler, when I was designing Quiet. And so realistically, Quiet would be able to do almost nothing with their proportions, but thankfully they're a
Mhm.
cartoon, so it's okay. Um, but yeah, I unfortunately, yeah, I think I missed the boat on getting her to pose for this character. But the feel I think is there, I think
Yeah, the
still.
inspiration comes through.
Yeah.
Was the narrator worm, was that at all based off what are those creatures? Like a nudibranch? Nudibranch? You know what I'm talking about?
I
Those
know
little
exactly
worms
what you're
with
talking
the
about. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes and no. Definitely nudibranchs, with their little flowery
Mhm.
little tufts. Moths with their little flowery,
Oh, nice.
little things there. What I was originally thinking when I was playing with was, I'll just draw it over here. If it's a narrator worm, a quill. I was thinking like, how do I integrate a
Oh.
quill into the design of this character? And so for a while I was like, it'll be the tail, but then I thought, I don't know, that looks kind of like a stinger or something, like or like it's just a little bit too sharp. And it didn't work. And so then I thought, well, what if then you have a character, if especially if it's just a mouth, right? You want something else to be able to do character work with. And so I thought these are kind of like eyebrows.
Which is
And
another
when
thing that Quiet doesn't have.
yes, exactly,
So between
exactly.
the two of them,
Between the two of them, exactly, they can pull together things. So if you have like, the things going down, well, now we know it's sad, that kind of thing. And so, and if they're standing straight up, now we know it's alert. So there's a lot of like possibility for kind of how do you cultivate a sense of personality.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's funny because I think a lot of these characters are kind of in part defined by what they have and what they don't have. The narrator worm, it has little hands like that, and so it really can't do much, physically, but it can speak, and so it has a mouth, and that mouth is expressive, and so. Um, but yeah, to answer your question, I was definitely looking at like moths and yeah, I'm actually going to lift this up just a little bit. Moths and try and other animals similar to that have kind of like fluffy, soft bits.
Nice. Hmm.
I'm just cognizant of like this character is we're kind of with the camera's a little bit below them, and so I'm raising up the light a little bit just to encroach on the face a little bit. Okay. So I think this is in a decent position. Actually, its legs are a little bit too long. And in a second here, I'm going to go in with the values and start messing with the values.
Cool. People really appreciated that walkthrough on all the subtlety of emotion, how clearly that comes through.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Good. Yeah. Even the villain has elements that I thought a lot about how to convey emotion with the villain because the villain he's not evil. He's not even a bad guy, but he's somebody who can't see the essential humanity in horrible entities like skeletons and things like that, who doesn't,
Hmm.
and who can't fathom something like quiet being not a bad thing and not an aberration against nature itself. He's very dogmatic. So I designed him with a helmet
Which
that
covers his eyes.
covers his eyes.
Perfect. Seeing the method.
Exactly. And so, oh, I'm angry. That's kind of his, and he's got the large horns, of course, which is very iconic of his character. But
Hmm.
again, the idea of like he can't see. He actually can't see, and it's when you look at it, when you look at his mask, especially, and I'll just pull up another image real quick of that. And I promise after this, everybody, I'll stop toggling back and forth between drawing and not, but I think there's so much ground to cover and it's a world that excites me. But if you look at this mask, I mean, his
Yeah.
eyes, his nose is here, his eyes are like up here, I mean, he actually can't see. Um, but it doesn't matter because it's a cartoon. And it
Does the
looks,
audience ever get to see him without his helmet?
yes, yes.
Ooh, what color eyes does he have? Are they beautiful?
I think they are kind of beautiful. I think they're kind of sad. I think they're beautiful. I think he's Nordic, so probably he has blue eyes, probably.
All right.
Um, Probably, I anticipate. Um, yeah, no, his whole backstory as well. I think his face will be surprising to people. Because I think, and I think it's one of those things also that, like, in Quiet Level One, I want very much for him to be a more enigmatic character, for his his desires and motivations to be a little unclear,
Hmm.
perhaps. But as the story goes, he is a speaking role, unlike Quiet. And with Quiet, I'm actually not even that interested in Quiet's backstory. I just feel like Quiet is he's similar to a hobbit, that wherever they came from, they just want to be peaceful, and whatever. And so that was another reason I kind of didn't I decided to have them be non-speaking, because I just thought I'm actually not so interested in knowing Quiet's backstory, motivation, etc. I'm much more interested in what Quiet does in the
Hmm.
context of the story, and where Quiet's values are, and who Quiet is as a person. Um, but Galahorn, the villain, is an actual person, and I'm interested in their development. I want to see how he changes over the course of the story. Um, and I think that will go hand in hand with seeing his face more and more. Um, yeah, because I do feel invested. I feel invested in both characters, honestly. The story is about a character named Quiet. Um, but and Quiet will compose, 60% of the story, but Galahorn will compose 40% of the story. Like still a huge chunk of attention and story time will be devoted to Galahorn's development and Galahorn's quest. Um, I thought, I'm not the biggest fan of superhero everything, even though I made a whole book on superheroes. I don't always love superheroes. But I feel like one thing that, for instance, the MCU did a really, really good job with was in Infinity War. Um, they treated the entire first movie, they treated Thanos, in a storytelling sense, as if Thanos was the hero.
Hmm.
It's, he was the one on the hero's journey. He was the one who had a mission that he needed to fulfill. He was the one who sacrificed things,
Yeah.
that meant a lot to him to get there. And so they really, and what was the result was that Thanos ended up being one of the most compelling characters in the MCU. Um, and so I'm very interested in, um, doing something not dissimilar, for Galahorn in this instance.
It's great. Everybody loves a complex antagonist
Everyone, absolutely.
that
I
you can
totally
root
agree.
for a little bit in their own way. Keys in the chat is asking or saying maybe Quiet is sort of an audience surrogate. And I think that's an interesting thought, that
Yes.
Quiet doesn't speak and has this sort of childlike wonder and is could maybe be an access point to this really rich world that you're building. Is that something you've intentionally left room for?
Yes. 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 Absolutely. That's a great observation. I once heard that, black eyes on teddy bears and things like that, and black eyes and characters, the big black pupils, we tend to project our own selves into that. It's kind of a blank slate, and we kind of see emotion in those. And so Quiet doesn't have eyes per se, but they have very expressive black holes. And I do think of that kind of teddy bear aesthetic of, like, you're projecting your feelings and thoughts into this character. And I think what you're saying is exactly right. I think Quiet, we're often seeing Quiet reacting, to their world and reacting to things, and we do put ourselves in, their shoes, or their little skeletal feet.
Metatarsals, right?
Yes, we mix our metatarsals, exactly. Um, And so I think that there's absolutely something there. And I think that was another reason why I felt pretty okay removing Quiet's voice, because like the protagonist of, Zelda, Link never speaks really, but Link's the main character and has always been the main character. Um, and I think in my mind, I'm like, it just obviously doesn't make a difference in terms of, are people invested in this character? Well, if Quiet one day spoke up and said, "Oh, my family was killed by Galahorn. I'm motivated by the desire for justice and all that," it doesn't make Quiet more interesting
Or more
because it's
relatable.
or more relatable. Exactly. Like I have, my family has not been massacred by a giant barbarian, so I don't know what that's like.
Thank goodness.
Um, but we all know what it's like to face things that are scarier and bigger than ourselves, and to me, that's the journey that really matters. Um, so yeah, let me just play around with an idea here. What if Quiet's reflection had like, I have been thinking a lot about um does Quiet have an evil twin?
Oh, loud.
And I think the answer honestly is absolutely. So as I'm incorporating their shadow here, I'm actually thinking, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and move Quiet over just a little bit and to accommodate um, their shadow, because I think there's some, it's not even storytelling potential, simply compositional potential. I think just moving Quiet over to one side and then allowing a little bit more space for the shadow, whether or not the shadow is actually evil, it just creates a balance,
Hmm.
which I kind of appreciate. But and then if I do have the eyes, I'm like, well, then maybe I need to move over a little bit more just to get the real eyes in there. But maybe it's a little bit done, and it's a little hard to say. Might be a little bit too canned, but we'll see. I mean, it might not too canned, sorry. It might be a little bit too obvious, right? Like, oh, the evil shadow is watching you, and maybe that's a little bit too much. Um, or maybe not.
Fill it out. Yeah, it all depends, right?
All depends.
Hmm.
Um,
Nice. Some cool values going on.
yeah, I'm just trying to lay them in and just see kind of how I feel about the flow of things. There's so much. One thing I really like about art and this kind of painting that we're doing right now, and this, one reason, Katya, that I'm so excited to like do this digital painting is because I just get to invent a lot of things. I just get to create whatever makes me feel happy and motivated and interested. Like what is going on um in the picture, and not having to feel too much like, oh, I have to connect that back to the main
Hmm.
story, or things have to be a certain way. And it's another reason why, for instance, I really am enjoying the comic, not just the comic medium, actually, because that's actually maybe inconsistent with comics, but a more whimsical storytelling, because there's a little bit less emphasis on like, oh, does the lore all line up exactly, and does that make sense, and and part of me is kind of like, who cares? Like, let's make a fun story, because I think there's so much room for great storytelling that is implied, a lot of, that doesn't have to be um everything just so. All right, let me just take a moment here to. All right, I'm going to go ahead and first of all, I'm going to flip this. I'm going to make this a group. I'm going to flip it horizontally, just because I always find that always refreshes me. It makes me feel a little bit more um, understanding of what's going on. So definitely looking at this, their shadow is even creepier. I'm going to get rid of those eyes just for the moment, just because I don't know, because I feel like they're threatening to overpower things a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, uh, in terms of the storytelling of this thing. I'm also going to create a little bit more softness. I'm going to pull this reflection in a bit more, um, so it's not quite so far out. And then I added this one more layer up here at the top, because I'm actually trying to now wrestle with something that's going to be kind of hard, which is if the lighting is just slightly below, if the eye line is like here. Oops. The eye line is like here, and we're kind of looking up. I'm just trying to then grapple with like, okay, how does a wall, what's the wall behind them like? Like this?
Hmm.
I can't. Creating things that are slightly off balance is definitely a way to cultivate tension and a
Yeah.
lack of control. I'm going to go ahead and remove these lines back here. They no longer really serve me, and I already have some lines that are doing similar things, just to kind of clarify things a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and so I'm trying to I'm just imagining, okay, if this was the brick wall behind Quiet, like do the bricks go like this, or do they go? Is it like this? If just trying to imagine what that's like. And this here creates a bit more um tilted quality, a little bit more mad, like a little out of control. And that makes me wonder, like, okay, I like that a lot, actually, in terms of what it does compositionally.
Hmm.
Let me erase that, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab Quiet themselves, all this here, and I'm going to tilt. I'm going to tilt them a little bit,
Hmm.
just to create a little bit more of that sense of imbalance. Um, and as you can see, there's a little bit of artifacting that's occurring along the edges. What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Yeah. Comes with the territory.
Comes with the territory. Yeah, exactly.
This is starting to super, super loosely remind me of that scene in Howl's Moving Castle where he calls upon the dark spirits and
Mm.
everything sort of starts to warp a little bit. That's what you're talking about, kind of adding tension through perspective and warping. It kind of rang a bell about that for me, and I love that. It's almost like these forces are um, not just existing in the place, but changing the whole fabric of the reality in that location.
I love that idea. I love that idea. Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, exactly. Like this isn't just magical shadows. Quiet picked this up and things are changing.
Hmm.
I love that idea. Thank you for making that reference. Anytime anyone makes a Miyazaki reference, I am thrilled. So
Huge point of inspiration for me, and I know so many people who are in storytelling focused art.
yeah, I mean they have such, I mean, yeah, exactly. Storytelling. Do you have a favorite Miyazaki film?
Um, I know lots of people say Spirited Away, but I have to say Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but man, I grew up on Totoro and Kiki's Delivery Service. It's tough to pick a favorite. But I think as I am now a little bit older, I think Howl's Moving Castle is sort of settled in that number one spot for me. How about you?
Oh, well, let me ask you this, just why do you think it was Howl's Moving Castle?
I think those big sweeping landscapes of the wastes and the juxtaposition of sort of the cluttered grand city, but then the protagonist having to go out into the wastes to sort of find herself.
Hmm.
Um, I think that really strikes a chord with me. Um, and they're a little. It's one of the more romantic of the Miyazaki
Hmm.
films.
Hmm.
But that's secondary to sort of the core of self-discovery. And also it's pretty. It is so pretty.
Absolutely.
It's just pretty. But yeah, how about you?
Um, I think, yeah, it's really hard for me too. I just finally got my wife to watch Spirited Away, and she was absolutely enthralled and just
Oh,
loved it.
good.
We've gone to, she's not one to generally love cartoons as an adult because I think they kind of freak her out, like kind of harking back to those like, Adult Swim or like Ren and Stimpy kind of
Yeah,
creepy, weird ones. They kind of give her the heebie-jeebies sometimes.
sure.
But we
Rightfully
went,
so.
yeah, exactly. And we said they're kind of designed to do, right? Um, but we went to Japan last year with our daughter was at that point 4,
How
um,
cool.
or 3 actually, almost 4. and she was just old enough to make that trip, and we just had a magical time. It was just a really, Japan was finally starting to open up after COVID, and it was just a great time, a great trip, and my wife was just in heaven, and I think she just, came away with just a much just a better understanding of Japan and
Hmm.
of Japanese culture and of and Japanese art, all these things. Um, because she wasn't like me. She didn't grow up with anime and things like that. I think that was not her bag. I think she was too cool, and I did not suffer from the affliction of being cool. Um, so, but I mean, but after that trip, finally last year, I got her to watch it, and she was just like, "Oh my gosh, I love it! I love it! I love it!" So, yeah, I love Spirited Away. I think that the inner nerd in me is a big fan of Nausicaa, uh,
Mm,
for the giant insects and things like that, where
that makes sense.
I'm so into that stuff because I love bugs and I love weird things like that. And Yeah, and Howl's Moving Castle was great. I just saw My Neighbor Totoro for the first time
Oh, really? Nice.
recently. Yep. Well, because I've been trying to get my daughter to watch it, but she's traditionally been a little bit scared, because she's just she's very young. Um, but
Aw.
yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard. And I haven't seen the new one, the Heron
Boy and the Heron.
Boy and the Heron. I was about to say
I haven't
The Heron Boy.
either. Yeah, I haven't either. It's on my queue. But that's so fun. You said you did get her to watch Totoro?
I did finally, and so I was
That's
like just so taken by that.
that's great. That's the first one. I had it on VHS and I think I wore that thing out.
I'm just thinking. I'm trying to think of like again that like third element, and I think the pedestal
Mm,
here is the right way to go. And I think it's an opportunity for maybe some storytelling where if like it's a little imposing, it creates another dark form in the
in the foreground.
foreground that
Nice.
kind of frames a little bit better. Um, Maybe I want to, yeah. And I think also like if I create some little embellishments on the stone itself, that creates an opportunity for a little bit of storytelling. Maybe we see some sinister somethings on it, so we get a sense of like of what this thing, maybe what I'm saying is maybe there's some implied storytelling in the relief,
Yeah.
actually I'm going to pop that in the foreground. And I'm treating it a little bit at the moment less like an object and more like just a mass to see, okay, if that's in the composition, how does it thrust the composition around? Because now what we have here, and I'll create a new layer just to emphasize this, and I'll make it colored. Now we have these nice compositional lines that do like this, you know,
Nice.
which is cool because then we're that's kind of also how the light's going on their face a little bit. And so just by creating this third object, you can see creating that third object, we're enhancing that feeling, of like this is a focal point and things are radiating out from that. Now that also tells me, or at least makes me feel like I should be enhancing that even more in these lights in the background. So or in the shadows in the background. And so, I'm going to go ahead and just maul some of the work I've done here to create these lines here,
Mhm.
that are more in line with that kind of that do create that same sensation. Um, and maybe the shadow is a little bit smaller, so I'll pull that in just a little bit. And then you have, I think I actually did that in Phantasmagoria. Yeah, I was kind of making it more as I went along, but you can see, well, I guess it doesn't quite do the same thing, but I'm doing the same general principle where everything's kind of streaking into this one point.
Mhm.
And I like to think about that kind of stuff a lot when I'm doing these paintings is, what's the, what's the visual flow? What's the action? How are things how am I directing the attentions of the viewer? I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit smaller, the shadow a little bit smaller as we get in and tilt it a little bit more in towards quiet. to again create that imbalance there a little bit.
Nice.
That kind of weird, creepy, looming, stretching shadow thing.
Awesome. Just wanted to say hey to everybody in the chat. Thanks for being here. Glad this is fun to watch.
Yeah.
Other than sitting on your school computer all day. Nice.
Yeah, thanks everybody for watching. You know what? I know we only have like 25 more minutes. God, it always goes so fast every time I'm on these streams. Um, Let me go ahead and just for funsies, create a new adjustment layer gradient map. This is how I like to start a lot of the coloring process. I'm
Oh,
not ready to
cool.
color, but for the sake of this stream right now, I think it's kind of a fun thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a color layer. And then we'll go in here and start messing around. Actually, let's get this out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. Do you ever mess with gradient maps?
Yeah, that is a great tip. I don't do as much digital painting myself, but man, I use them on photos though, and it's a great way to add color to something that's black and white to just get started.
Yeah.
Versus what I used to do is just use like a color overlay, but that doesn't do the same thing, doesn't map the values.
Yeah, it doesn't matter the values. You're right.
How cool.
So I'm trying to think of like what's a good progression of color. So if I want, just trying to think of how to balance, how to create like a warmer tone or right when the light hits. I mean, maybe I don't want that though. Maybe I want, I don't know. I won't know what I want until I see it.
That is such a great way to super quickly play around with different color combinations in something that's more gradated.
Yeah, it's
Because to do
super.
this manually would be insanely long to try.
It would be. It really would be. And there's obviously, when you create a gradient map like that, you're creating a wash over the entire piece, and maybe that's not what you want. But it's a great starting point, because in an instance like this, I want to figure out like, well, you know, is there a good light and a bad light? Since this is all the same lighting, this is all coming from the same light source. Maybe I want it to be just super creepy and super consistent. Maybe it's just, rendered in, maybe I'll remove the orange and just have the green, but I kind of like that little touch of yellow and red. It kind of creates a little bit warmer there. And I want us to feel a little bit warmer about quiet themselves. And then as we stretch out, we start to see these horrible monstrosities kind of looming in. Incidentally, I'm also thinking of like, I don't know, like expanding out to one side or something, but I'm not sure. I need to figure out what are I just did this frame so quickly. I didn't think very hard about the exact proportions. I'm gonna make this just a tiny bit wider, just to give me a little bit more space. And where's my lines? Okay. Just give you just a little bit more room to play with on the other side. Okay. And then I think, and in an instance like this, I might create a bit of a balance of light by basically saying, okay, I'll have a lighting source that is a cool blue that is actually just coming from, where am I? Why is it not showing up? Do I have something selected? No. Aha, there it is. Just be like, to counterbalance, to counteract,
Light.
yeah, and maybe give a sense of like maybe where quiet entered from, to be here, in this creepy room. Maybe blue is not the right way to go. Maybe we can. That's a little bit too close to the green. I'll throw it right past there. Yeah, it's something to mess with.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, from here, I mean, basically my goal, I think, will be to balance that, that kind of like really, let's push it. Let's take these kind of, you know, there's literally this expanding circles of interest,
Hmm.
that kind of go out and out and out. And we start with the lantern. And so when I create the actual lantern, when I actually get in there, I'm going to have to figure out a way to bring the camera close enough that we can really see the lantern. And maybe because, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for like creepy embellishments on it. And, so you can see like, oh, it's this old metal lantern or something. And right now it's all white. It's like he's literally holding like an LED or something. But I want to figure out a way to make it potentially oh, you know what? Before I forget, let's hit the save button.
Always good.
Always good, always good. But maybe we make it, like it's just darker, and then it's got maybe weird, creepy cutouts,
Mhm.
Um, I don't know how it looks exactly, but there's a lot of storytelling potential. Does it look like an insect? Does it look like a dragon? Is it round? Is it like a globe? Like is it like a sculpture with one little glowing stone on it? All these things are opportunity for storytelling. Um, so I'm not sure what direction I'm going to go with that, but for now, I'll just keep it lit like there. But because of these expanding rings of storytelling, while quiet will be the emotional focus of the picture, obviously we want to get some sense of what the story is like, looking at the object they're carrying. So funny. I'm looking at this picture as a thumbnail image on the stream, and I'm like, oh, it's like in so many ways it's so bad. But
I
it's
don't think
like
anybody's thinking that.
it's just such a wreck. I mean, just up close you look at it and it's like it's got so many things wrong with it, but it's okay because you can see how my brain works, right? Like you can see how I'm kind of trying to oh yeah, one thing I want to point out is that I'm not trying to make this perfect. I'm not trying to make I'm not trying to make the pose right. I'm not trying to get there's a lot of things I'm not trying to do, um, because I really want to focus on like what is the thesis statement of this image and how do I get that across. Um, so I'm really focusing on that. This looks a little bit like a toilet, which is not ideal. Um, Hopefully with some gilding along the outside of this thing, it'll look a little bit less like a toilet. And maybe we see a little bit of like, the lit edge of this thing as it goes around, like that. It's still not aligning with Quiet's legs. Quiet's sense of verticality is not on point with this thing. And I need to get these things correctly in proportion to each other. So go ahead and just move those a little bit in, so that we get it. So that we really understand that, like, oh, I see this whole image is canted to one side. That's kind of an important element. I think these legs are still too long, actually. I consistently make Quiet's legs too big, too long, and then I keep thinking, no, 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 you got to make them real small. They're a real small little guy.
So at this point, are you still working in grayscale underneath the gradient map?
I am. I am.
Nice.
Yeah. There's the black and white. And that gradient map certainly adds drama, but as you can see, like it's just a color layer. And so there's a lot of things that can change on one layer and still affect the whole. Let me switch this again. Horizontal. So it feels like we're a little crowded. We're just a little crowded in some ways. So I'm going to grab Quiet. Yeah, this is another reason why I try to keep it real simple, real basic, really messy, is because I want to make sure that my fundamentals are in place
Hmm.
before I really commit. And sometimes I worry that when I do these streams with Adobe and my final result by the end of the hour and a half is just not that pretty. Because I spend so much time wrestling with just the foundation of a piece, you know?
I think
Um,
that's so valuable. I mean, coming from an award-winning concept artist, I think people are super interested in the laying down of the roadmap and the thought process. At least I am. This has
Good.
been
I'm so
awesome.
glad. Yeah. Well, and I also want to emphasize, like, even just the flattering way you said that, and thank you for describing me as an award-winning artist. I love it. Um, but I think, I think something that's really important for me, for I think for people to know and to see about my art is that it doesn't look very grand for most of its development. It just looks it's kind of a mess a lot of the time. And I just want to emphasize like that this is my normal lived experience. I
Mhm.
mean, when I'm making art, a lot of the time it is just not what I would deem to be good. But I don't concern myself with that. I'm not worried about it because it will get good. I know that it will get good, but spending some extra time on these fundamentals is often what really sets you up later for success, where even even you know in like another like hour or something, this will look pretty cool, from at least in a thumbnail perspective, that it will be pretty short on specifics and on detail, but it should look pretty cool eventually. Eventually. um yeah. So in trying to figure out the balance here, I'm kind of thinking, okay, again, if we're operating on this kind of being the line work, that tells me, okay, I have dark, light, dark, which maybe this dark should be just a little bit bigger up here. And then it tells me once again, I should go a bit more big on the lighting up here. So
Hmm.
that we go dark, light, dark, light. And essentially, you're creating really just like an even bigger light source there. And then maybe I can edge in on the sides, a little bit more. Um, but creating that balance there. And maybe, maybe on the wall behind them, there's some more engravings, or maybe just, I don't know what'll be back there. But obviously, I think if I still incorporate these demons into the shadows, which I think I will, because that's cool. Um, yeah, then maybe I won't have to worry too much about the actual line work or the detail of the background, because the emphasis really is on those shadows. Trying to keep those, just trying to keep the background as simple as possible.
Nice. I like it. I'm curious, looking like jumping into the future down the road, at what point will you, flatten in, rasterize the color, the gradient map, and then start working from that? Like at what point do you know you're ready to kind of commit to those colors?
Yeah, good question. I think when the foundations are in place, when I get the balance right between these elements here, and I get a general sense of like what the actual composition is like of the backdrop. So for instance, remember I did this before, but I'll try to do it again real quick. Just trying to figure out, what is what are the line, what's the actual wall like behind them. Once I figure out these foundational pieces, and like, and then it kind of becomes time to just start making things just look better. First of all, wait a second. First of all, unfortunately, these lines would not, right now I have them kind of also coming in, but that doesn't actually make sense. It would be more like this coming out. Um, and is that running counter to my piece? I don't know. But yeah, once I get the foundations in place, then I'll feel much more comfortable in terms of just like rasterizing it, flattening it out. I would probably want to keep quiet on a separate layer,
Hmm.
the shadow on a separate layer for a while, just so I can continue to manipulate those and use them as clipping masks and all these different things. Um, Yeah, but I am a fan, honestly, of flattening things out. A lot of artists put a lot of effort into making sure um um, to have all their layers preserved. And I'm kind of resist that a lot because I find that when you start preserving layers, you become more and more precious
Yeah.
with everything. And I try to avoid being precious because I find it to be a time sink.
Hmm.
And in the past, I've kind of told myself, okay, well, if you're being more rough and ruthless with the backdrop, well, you're kind of giving yourself extra work and you have to like go back in and like uh paint more. And so in the past I've kind of been like, well, good, you should paint more, like do it again, but better this time, and I do think there's something to be said for that,
Huh.
of kind of not being so precious and trying to um cope with your mistakes, because I think another reason why I like doing traditional pen and ink art is that you make a lot of mistakes. And that, in my mind, kind of forces you to learn more, to kind of be a little bit more engaged, a little bit more actively paying attention as you go,
Hmm.
and be ready and willing to make adjustments accordingly. Um,
Nice.
all right, as we round the
Awesome.
bend to the last couple of minutes, I'll just try to create a little bit more specificity in these shapes. I don't know if I want to create so much the actual figures themselves as I want to create the feel of them. And so I'll be using
Hmm.
kind of sharper, thinner lines to create that, in the same way that the shape language of quiet themselves is um, round and soft looking. I want these forms to be much more spidery and sinuous.
Nice. Hmm. Yeah, and so in our just last couple minutes, where will you go from here? When you develop this out, uh, off stream or maybe on a different stream. But what's like the next step after you after this one?
I think the next step will be to break this down into layers where quiet's on a layer, this thing is on a layer, and I can start messing with those and just pushing them around a little bit,
Hmm.
etc. And then creating a couple layers for the backdrop, bringing this gradient map into, rasterizing it and then painting on top of it or making slight adjustments to it. And then after that, as I'm doing here a lot, I'm focusing a lot on values and making sure the values are doing what I want them to. So for instance, right now I'm creating more of that highlight back here because, again, remember, light, dark, light, kind of swooping up like this. Um, and then I'll start just layering on details, honestly,
Hmm.
going in just greater and greater resolution, like in the movies when they're like enhance,
Yeah.
enhance, like that's what I'll do. And then at that point, I'll just kind of enhance until it kind of reaches that stage where it's like, okay, I think I'm like maximally enhanced for what it is. Um, yeah, and then, the addition of details is something I loved doing, but it's such a slippery slope.
Hmm.
Um, and you want to make sure that you're doing it with in the amounts and in the amounts and the location and everything that makes the most sense. You don't want to waste effort, on details that don't necessarily make sense.
Nice.
So yeah, I think getting this right is going to be really critical. So probably, and another thing I'll probably do, honestly, is I will take a break, walk away from it, and then when I come back, I will almost certainly see things that I didn't see before. Um, and that's going to help me in the same way as flipping the image left to right helps you see the image again, but with new eyes. Um, I think that will be the case, as if I walk away. So, but yeah, I'll probably walk away. Um, I'm tilting Quiet's eyes down a little bit, just so, like, kind of giving them a bit more of like an angle so that they really seem like they're looking at this thing,
Awesome.
looking.
Well, I absolutely can't wait to see this finished. Speaking of taking a break, we're just about out of time. I could watch this for hours and
Woo!
hours. But you guys should take a little tiny break and then come back to keep watching Adobe Live. There is much more fun stuff to come. And thank you so much for being here. This has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, and I hope we get to do it again sometime.
I really hope so too. Kanshia, thank you so much for your amazing company and for your great questions. Thank you for everybody in the chat for your questions and for hanging out with me for a while. You can still secure your copy of Quiet Level 1 on Kickstarter. Just Google Quiet Level 1 Kickstarter. It's right there. Find me on Instagram, find me on Twitter, whatever it is. Thank you, Adobe. Thank you, everybody, so much. This has been a pleasure.
Bye, guys.